Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Wow, this is really happening. I'm Chris Quarto, your host of the Private Practice Journeys podcast. I can't wait to do this. This has been something that I've been planning for a long time now. As many of you know, I'm the previous host of the Make a Mental Note podcast series. That just came to an end. I am so pumped to start this new podcast series about 4 therapists who discuss their experiences of what it's like to start and manage a private practice over the course of a year. Each therapist is interviewed once a month to find out what it's really like to be in private practice. Basically, the nuts and bolts, the highs and lows and lessons learned. And by only having 4 therapists participate on podcast episodes, you, as the listener, get depth of practical information as opposed to breadth of information, which is typical of other podcast series where a different therapist is interviewed each week. And I did that with the Make a Mental Note podcast, but I wanted something different this time. I wanted something unique. So you're going to be provided with nitty-gritty details and a realistic understanding of what it's like to start and manage a practice. Also, I want to make mention of the Private Practice Journeys community on Facebook that'll give you opportunities to discuss issues that are addressed on this podcast. We'll even have the 4 therapists in this Facebook community too. They'll be participating, and you can talk about any of the issues that are discussed on the podcast episodes or even any other private practice issues that are of interest to you, and you can sign up for that very easily. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I just want this to be a very brief podcast episode because this isn't about me. This is about the 4 therapists that are going to be part of this podcast series. But I do want you to know a little bit about me. I'm a professor in the professional counseling program at Middle Tennessee State University. This is my 20th year of teaching in that program. And we have clinical mental health and school counseling concentrations, and I've been blessed to be part of that faculty. We have a dynamic faculty and are doing amazing things. But really, my own journey, started way back in the mid-'80s, where I was a counselor at a community mental health center, basically the jack of all trades, trying to keep my head above water and just counseling people who had all these different problems, kids, adolescents, adults, and man, I'll tell you, it was trial by fire in that kind of an environment. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm so glad for what I did. But you know what? At that time, in the 1980s, there was no counselor licensure. In fact, only a handful of states were licensing counselors at that point in time. So there really wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to advance in my career. So I decided to go back to school, and I went and I applied for counseling psychology programs, and I got accepted to my top school, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Did the doc program, did my internship at a psychiatric hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then went directly into private practice, which was crazy, really, when you think about it, because how are you going to make it in private practice in a new community? My wife and I moved to Green Bay. It's like, how are you going to make it in private practice when you don't know anybody? And thinking back, that was probably a really dumb thing to do, but I had a very unique opportunity where I had just kind of sent out some letters. There was no internet at that time. Sent out some letters to private practitioners in Green Bay, told them what I wanted to do, and luckily I had co-owners of a particular practice called Green Bay Wellness and Behavioral Health Clinic who contacted me and said, you know what? We're intrigued. Would you be willing to come up here and have dinner with us so we could talk about this? And I said, of course. So my wife and I went up there, had dinner with them, and they said, you know what we're willing to do? We will pay you a salary out of our own profits. And because we think that you have a lot of potential and can do a lot to make money for our practice over the course of time, but we'll pay you out of the profits out of our own practice. And as your practice is geared up and you start making money, you can just pay us back from what you start making. Which, when I think about it, what an incredible risk they took to do that for me. I mean, I could have just run and been out of there without paying them back, but they took a risk, and I paid them back all of the money that they paid me up front. And it took me, about a year to really get up and running, and that second year to start paying them back all that money that they paid me. And after that, they asked me if I wanted to be a partner in the practice, and I said, sure. And after that, I was making some really good money, and so I did that for 6 years and full time. And but you know what? I always had this goal to want to teach at the university level in a graduate program. I never thought I could be a really good teacher unless I had that practical experience of being in private practice. And so I decided to apply to some grad programs as a faculty member, and got a job offer at Middle Tennessee State University back in 1997, and that's where I started that. And but you know what? I continued in part-time private practice in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I currently live, about 30 miles south of Nashville. And a lot of what I've done in private practice has been counseling and psychological testing. I do more testing nowadays, but I'm going to be expanding into distance counseling here in the future. That's one of my goals for 2017, is to do distance counseling. I've been trained and am credentialed as a distance credentialed counselor, and feel very proud about that. There's always a lot more to learn, but I'm going to be taking that plunge myself this year, but continue with all my other testing practice. And so I really love what I do, and but I've really wanted to give back. And so with the Make a Mental Note podcast series, I felt like I was giving back by interviewing these fantastic therapists across the United States doing wonderful things. And if you get the chance, if you haven't listened to that podcast series yet, I encourage you to do to do it. Just Google Make a Mental Note podcast, and you'll be able to get links to that. You can go on my website, chrisquarto.com, and listen to past episodes and get the show notes of all those episodes, but really some fascinating people that I've been able to interview. But you know what? It's time for a change, and that change brings me to this podcast series, Private Practice Journeys. So as we go along, you're going to listen to these 4 therapists talk about themselves and their own journeys into private practice and what it's really like to do this. And I can't wait for you to listen to this. And this is going to start very soon. So keep on listening. Also, I'd encourage you to join the Private Practice Journeys community on Facebook, so we can have more discussions about private practice and whatever's talked about on these podcast episodes. So I'm so thrilled. I'm so glad that for those of you who have been listening to Make a Mental Note, that you've made the transition to Private Practice Journeys and will continue on this trek with me on this new podcast series. So can't wait to talk to you guys, and see you soon.